Alright, so you're listening to the stream then, no one?
Yes.
Is it coming through?
It's coming through.
Excellent.
Hey, young one, looking to go on adventure. Descending the question wasteland to find all sorts of fun. So grab your gun and don't wait for the setting sun. 'Cause in the ruins of the world, wrapped in chaos swirl, let your mind be hurled into the wasteland unfurled. We live in a rotten world, nothing left to be found. But if you're gonna survive, follow the steps to stay alive. Cock back your gun, shoot first and run. You Now that you're more acquainted, well, let me show you why some fainted. Oh, see them heavily armed robots fighting them can get you into a knot. Oh, don't disturb the peace around here. Folks don't appreciate having to live in fear. As a matter of fact, just skip that road. Better stay away from the Canterlot Gold. We live in a rotten world, nothing left to be found. But if you're gonna survive, follow these tips to stay alive. Cock back your gun, shoot first and run. You don't wanna meet your end, no, no, no. Watch your back pocket and watch for big pocket. You don't wanna meet your end, no, no, no. Watch the wasteland, ah, watch the wasteland. Watch the wasteland, yeah, watch the wasteland. Oh, now that you've got the basics, you gotta learn how to talk. A quick flash of a gun is fun, but sometimes you need a silver tongue. Oh yeah, oh, it saves you some pain. Who knows what you can gain? Not everything is solved with a bullet. Or maybe try some flowers in a basket. Oh no, 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 no. Now get it on. Oh, watch the wasteland, yeah, yeah. Best luck, old stranger. I hope you listen well. Remember to watch you always watches, and the diamond dog's always dead. Oh yeah. Well, tread carefully on open ground. I hate to see where your body is found. And me, I'll just sit here and watch the wasteland. Watch the wasteland. Watch until the day, watch till the return of that sun.
All right, and welcome. Good evening, and welcome back to host Apoc Horse Talk. I'm your host, Galantagius, and unfortunately my co-host BG can't be with us right now. I believe he's struggling with traffic. So now our guest tonight is a writer of some great acclaim, whose fic has entered the hallowed annals of official canon for the FOE fandom. Please, it's my great pleasure to welcome to the show... Wait a minute. This can't be right. It can't have no guest. Oh wait. I see now. It's their name. I'd like to welcome No One. No One?
Hi, how you doing tonight? Just to get off on the right foot, I don't know if great acclaim is really where we want to be starting off. It's a bit too presumptuous, I think, but I appreciate it on the.
This is a subtle fluff piece. Take it. Take the hint.
So, I mean, yeah, of course.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Where I am at, it's not quite night yet, but I'm doing fine so far.
Good, that's great to hear. So, let us begin with the questions. This man always gets his answers. So, No One. You're the writer of Fall to Quest Your Heroes, a fic that has been received remarkably well by the fandom at large. And I am
That's what they tell me.
yes, and I am for one a big personal fan of this particular fic. And somewhat contentious topic, Flair is best Pegger.
Yes, of course.
So, you recently finished Heroes. No spoilers for our audience at home. But what can you tell us about the journey that you experienced while writing Heroes?
Alright, so when I first started writing the story, it was fucking years ago now, wasn't it?
It was many moons ago, indeed.
Many moons ago. It was an interesting journey for me. If people were reading since the beginning, they knew at the very beginning I wrote pretty quickly. And that slowly petered off until I was barely writing at all. Partially because as I was writing it, life happens. I started at a dead-end job, went to school.
We all know
went to
how
school.
that feels.
Yeah, exactly. I got my bachelor's degree as I was writing. I got my master's degree as I was writing it. Got a new job recently, just as I finished it, actually. So it's been a long journey, and it's kind of interesting looking back because you're not really the same person when you start writing something than when you finish writing, especially something that took me so long. So sometimes I like to go back and read the first few chapters and I go, "What the fuck was I thinking?" But it was a good journey. I mean, completing something that long gives you a sense, gives you experience writing, gets you that sort of foot in the door as it is, and sort of improves you as a writer, I think. So it was an interesting experience. It was a bit longer of an experience than I think everybody would have liked, but
No
yeah.
comment. Let's avoid that question entirely.
And I don't mean to interrupt or anything, but it seems like someone's. Sorry, keep going. Oh, I thought we got elusive co-host in, but I wasn't quite sure.
Perhaps.
The co-host has finally showed up, people. Please welcome BG back to the show after being a little late. You cannot avoid the ire of the fans.
There's nothing wrong with being a little late. I understand completely.
Says the man who was here plenty on time. Well,
I'm
anywho.
thinking he's on his phone, so he's not. He's figuring it out.
All right. So this is actually an interesting question, at least for me. Did you have a consistent idea on the narrative, on where you wanted to take the story from the start? Or did it change as you wrote? This is mostly a personal question, rather than one that's purely academic at this point.
Right. So a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. When I first started writing, I had a big long idea. Like I wrote down chapter by chapter what I wanted to happen, the basic plot points and all that. And then as I wrote, I cut half of it out and I changed the other half. And then it sort of changed as I wrote it because I decided that things that I thought would work didn't really work in practice, or things that I wanted to do were often maybe done better by somebody else. And I'm like, well, I can't really. It's not that I can't touch the topic, but if someone else is doing it better, why touch it at all? And a lot of it was just cutting down on a lot of things because as I first started writing, I had all these ideas, wanted to go here, there, and everywhere, but it's not really. In order to create a narrative, you need to have some sort of structure. And that's, I think, what a lot of people struggle with, especially in trying to write FOE fics in general, is because they try to base them off of the game. And the game, you can, like, especially Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, which have a much is much more chaotic in terms of the narrative because each little area has its own separate quest. So people try to write a story like that. And originally that's what I had planned. And then it didn't really work out. So about halfway through the story, I settled down. I cut off big chunks of it, stuff that didn't work, and tried to focus on what I thought was the most important part of it. So the answer to the question is I did have an idea at the start, and the idea was bad. And then
I wouldn't say that. Like, at least from what you showed at the beginning of the fiction, from my experience, I had an idea where you wanted to go with it, and I didn't think it was a bad idea.
Oh well, I guess bad is a subjective terminology. Perhaps I felt it wasn't where I wanted to go. Like I wanted to be a bit more. Um, as I wrote it, I wanted to go in a particular direction. I wanted to make it more streamlined almost, because I feel some fics get a bit too distracted by things that don't end up mattering to the main point because they think it's cool, and that comes back to the old
I believe you
writing.
wanted to avoid what people call in the fandom a somber effect.
Yeah, I mean that was part of it. Like I didn't really base the idea off of what happened with Sombra's fic, and really they're incredibly popular. Like people always have their criticisms. I have my own criticisms
Well,
as
I
well, but
say
the
it's something
fic
in the
is
fandom. I coined that term right now.
to Sombra effect. But I mean it was still an incredibly popular fic. It's just not really what I wanted to do with it, and I didn't really have the time to write something of that length, anyways. Um, but I think if you want to write something good, eventually you got to start figuring out what of your brilliant ideas you need to cut out. Kill your darlings, as the saying goes.
Well, that's often a thing with other forms of art, as far as I'm aware. Uh, this is a bit of a UK-ish example here for the audience at home. There was a TV show. Everyone's probably well aware of this TV show, uh, Sherlock.
Yes.
The the problem with the first episode, A Study in Pink, if I'm not mistaken, was that it suffered from way too much time on its hands. It was trying to tell a really big story and had all the time in the world to tell it. And because of
Some
that, lots of things that weren't really necessary for the plot were placed in there. I can see the parallels between your work, Heroes, and Sherlock. You successfully took the stance that less is more.
in a lot of ways, and I feel like you'll find that in a lot of things, people, especially in fan fiction writing, you basically like the world's your oyster, so people want to go everywhere to something. But in a lot of ways, having defined the limitations that constricts you a little bit allows you to be a bit more creative. So at a certain point, I decided that I wasn't going to go beyond a certain number of chapters, and then I had to figure out how I was going to finish the story within that number of chapters. Because otherwise, I could have kept writing till I was 68 and 92 or whatever. But I was like, I need to stop at a particular point. So it was almost an arbitrary number of 40 chapters. I was like, that's where I'm going to cut it off, and that's where I'm going to be done. And I was like, how do I fit what I want to tell within that constraint?
Mm. Well, how about I ask the next question before I lose my train of thought?
No problem.
So, as far as I can see, on your film fiction account, you only have the one story attached to it, the aforementioned Heroes. Did you have any experience writing before Heroes that isn't shown on film fiction or elsewhere?
Oh, certainly. When I was in my teens, there was a forum I used to go on, and there was a P section of it, but it was more like really long form. So people would post like 5 or 6 paragraphs per post, and that would be like your RP post. So I did a lot of that for years back in this forum. Beyond that, I wrote a few fantasy stories when I was in my late teens and early 20s just because I felt like writing something. They weren't very good either, but it was a lot of practice, but no one really saw them. But in terms of like stuff people actually read, Heroes was definitely my first. Everything else I wrote was either just for myself or for a really small group of people.
All right. Well, in that somewhat vein of work being done for the future, is there something new you'd like to, well, work on or want to share that you're working on something new with the viewers?
Oh God, no. So, basically by the time I finished Heroes, like to be honest, I don't really watch the show at all anymore. I haven't for a while, and while I like the setting, I've sort of Heroes is really all I really want to do with it. I had a few story ideas within the FOE setting previously, but it's not at this point. It's not really something I'm very interested in doing. I am still writing, of course, but nothing really within the setting, and nothing that's really going to be seen by anybody for quite a while. So that's kind of a disappointing answer, I know, but
Apparently, I'm echoing.
uh, I a little bit. I guess it's not really that noticeable to me, but now it might be coming through my mic here. I'll push myself with a push to talk. It happens sometimes on my mic.
I do apologise about this, viewers at home.
Yeah, that seems to have remediated that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's continue on with the interview.
My fault.
This
really,
is
I
a somewhat This is a somewhat obligatory question, as I'll probably ask this of every guest that comes on it. What got you into the FOE fandom in the first place?
I mean, obviously the original story. It's actually funny. I had never actually played a Fallout game before I actually started reading the story, and the story is actually what got me into the Fallout games to begin with. So back in season 1 of Friendship is Magic, because I started watching at like episode 5, so it's fairly early. That when the story first came out, it was only a few chapters in, and I started reading it then. Just because I was really into the fandom and I wanted to read the content of people saying it was a good story. I read a few chapters when I have no idea what the hell is going on, so I started playing the games and reading the story at the same time.
Jump into the deep end, as it were.
Exactly. And then eventually I said, it was like, well, I could probably write one of these. Even though I didn't know the games that well, I just started playing Fallout New Vegas, I think, when I started writing. And I didn't really know, the story wasn't even done when I started writing, so yeah, I jumped in fairly early.
That is pretty interesting. Let's not look at the chat, because that's just going to be a place of madness. So,
Yeah.
How do you feel that the FOE fandom is going right now? Where do you think it will be this time next year, perhaps?
I mean, it's difficult to say. Like, it's no secret the fandom in general has sort of been on the decline for a while now. Just because it hasn't been like there's been fewer people watching the show and people sort of been drifting away from it. So I'm sure the fandom will still be going, but I do think it has been constricting for a while now. But that being said, I know they're coming out with a new show, and who knows what people could do with that. It could revitalize it completely.
Possibly. I'm talking more specifically FOE rather than MLP specifically.
Right, and I understand. I think it's intertwined in a way. You can have MLP without FOE, but you can't really have FOE without MLP. I do think that there are some people who still read FOE stuff without having watched the show in a while, or without really being engaged in the that part of the fandom. But I think as a whole, it is probably gonna continue to constrict unless something new comes out that sort of grabs people's attention again. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think all things. The level of popularity it was back when it first started wasn't really sustainable. It's not very happy answers, I know. I'm sorry.
Well, I can't make you have happy answers. You're the one giving them. Well, let's just take another journey on the depression train, guys.
Isn't that what it's all about, though?
All right. Seeing as you're a writer, I imagine you have a somewhat more objective opinion on other people's work. Is there another fiction that you really enjoyed or really like the formula of in an FOE fic?
Now, just to be clear, I don't think there's really an I mean, there is objective ways to view writing, but I think to what you really enjoy is always going to be subjective, right?
Of course, like everyone has an opinion, and
Right.
Yeah.
If we're talking about fics that I thought were really well done, Murky #7. Well, I had my issues with it, mainly because I don't have the attention span to read stuff. It was. I think it's pretty clearly the best written out of any of the fics I have read.
I've heard pretty much nothing but good things about Murky #7 as well, and many of my personal friends would also highly recommend it. An individual whose name shall not be named here for protecting the innocent
And
really
definitely
likes this fic.
Definitely, and it is quite good. Like I said, I have my own issues with it that I think sort of, detracted it from me. But as a whole, in terms of how well written it is, I think it's probably the best well written. It's been a while since I read any new fics. To be honest with you, most of the ones that I really enjoyed stopped updating years ago, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Lots of
Which
really good works have been just unfortunately forgotten.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Cashin, he wrote a fic, and I cannot remember the name of it, but it was like a wintry, cold fic, and then I quite enjoyed it.
Did he go by the name of maybe Tonto the Trotter on FimFiction?
No, that was somebody else. His name, to my understanding, was Cashin on FimFiction as well. But it was, like I said, actually, was he? I can't remember if he was even on FimFiction because I think it was before that was a thing. He, but like I said, Operation Flankerage, that's what it was called. It had like 11 chapters. I quite liked it at the time, but like I said, it hasn't been updated in years now.
That is an unfortunate side effect of the FOE fandom. While there are some fantastic works out there that are just as interesting and captivating as the original one that spawned this whole fandom within a fandom, there is also, unfortunately, a large graveyard of fics that either didn't get finished, people lost interest, or just never went anywhere.
And I think that's sort of what I was talking about earlier. We're talking about like scope, right? Like I tried to constrict my scope because I realized if I went through what I originally planned, I was never going to finish it. And I think a lot of people were younger than me when FOE first came out, and was like, oh, I can write this as well, and then sort of got their hands in it and didn't have know enough about writing to know that they needed to constrict it. So they had all these wild plans, and then eventually it becomes too unwieldy, and they just don't have the patience for it anymore. And then without having a strong, like a lot of these fics didn't end up having like a super strong fan base. Some people just sort of faded away from it. Because it became just a lot of it becomes too convoluted for them to really wrap their own heads around. Never mind explain to someone else. If you know George Merton, he kind of had a similar issue with any time he tries to write is that he's made his story way too big, that it's almost impossible for him to figure out what he's gonna do with it. And obviously his story is a lot bigger than a lot of fan fictions, but it's a similar idea with just less experienced writers getting a bit over their heads and then being like, well, I can't finish this, I'm out.
Yeah, I understand how that feels, at least from a personal perspective. I've done a bit of writing in my time. No, you will not be able to see my fictions. They will stay hidden forever.
That's a shame. I want to see it now. But and that's another
maybe
thing is I
privately.
think, and I think another thing is sometimes people underestimate how difficult writing can be. So they think, oh, this will be easy. I have all these great ideas, and then once they put pen to paper for a few chapters, they're like, this is difficult, and it's not going as well as I thought. So I'm just gonna quit now instead of using that time to improve. People are
Yeah,
like, well, I
quit
thought it'd be
while you're
easier, so
ahead.
I'm probably gonna head out.
Plus, one could say there's this tangible feeling of everyone in the fandom suddenly having a whole lot less time once they hit that mark of finishing high school, finishing college. Well, shit, gotta start working.
Yeah, that's probably a lot of it too, because the fandom, at least when it first came out, was fairly young. And then that was back in 2012 when the fic first came out, or something. 2011 maybe.
I think it was 2011. It was, I think it was 8 years ago now.
but almost a decade. So if people were 17 then, they're 25 now, out of school, out of college, and then you have a lot less time on your hands, and which makes it more difficult as well. Unless we start getting younger people in the fandom to write more, or people who don't have jobs, I suppose. That can be difficult. I know, I personally, when I was going through school and college, like especially my master's degree, my writing basically tanked because I was just too busy to do it. And when I did have free time, I was like, I don't want to fucking do this. I'm tired.
Life is an unfortunate time where you have to do things that aren't the things you enjoy.
Yeah, exactly.
And it takes the enjoyment out of the things you enjoy too.
Especially
so
when
let's just keep this
you get old.
depression train rolling because everyone loves to be sad today.
I should have warned you that I'm just a very sad person.
Let's move on to the next question. Well, before I find new and interesting ways to feel sad today. I think we kind of covered this just a moment ago, but I'll bring it up again. Was there a fiction that you read that saw some promise that didn't get finished? Something that's kind of particularly stuck in your mind?
Yeah, so like I was saying, Operation Flankerage by my good friend Kat. At the time, I haven't talked to him in a while, unfortunately, but we were close friends for a while, and I thought that was a really good fic with some interesting ideas that people weren't really using. That didn't get. And there was another one by my friend Velet called FOE Ashes that had some interesting stuff going on that, again, didn't really end up going anywhere. So a lot of the mysteries that I was looking forward to seeing sort of vanished into the night, unfortunately. Those are the two that come like immediately to mind when I think of unfinished fics that I was really looking forward to.
All right, then. So this show has already developed something of a reputation at this point of being contentious because, controversy sells papers, or in this circumstance, streams. So I mean to start as I want to go on. Was there a fic that you enjoyed or found kind of enjoyable that was basically become a meme within the fandom? And let's not say Project Horizons because we keep bashing Sombra here. Can we not do that for a little bit? I'll end up drawing his ire at some point, and I prefer not.
Something that I found enjoyable that other people didn't like.
Well, not didn't like, but a meme. It became a meme.
Honestly, the only memes really in the fandom, Broken Steel and this Project Horizons to some people, and both those I didn't really like to begin with. I guess Pink Eyes, there's some people who I mean it's basically a meme, like the story is a, but I that would be the closest one because even though it had some interesting writing because the author wasn't a native English speaker, and it was very meme heavy. I actually quite liked it, at least at the time. It's been a while since I read it, but it always made me laugh and smile.
It does
So
seem
Pink Eyes,
that a lot of people have a very positive opinion of Pink Eyes. Like I haven't found a single person that thought they kind of disliked it.
well, I found that most people liked it if they read it when it first came out, but a lot of people came into the fandom later who I've talked to said they didn't really get it. So it could just be a product of its time. We're not going to read Project Human. You got to stop that.
Don't look into the chat. I told you, it's just madness that lies there.
But
I know it's fun, but madness is not a fun thing.
I'm not used to this. So I'm looking at. No, I'm not. Now they're trying to get me. I'm not okay. I'm just gonna cover that part of my screen. You can do.
Anyway, let's suffice to say it was quite helpful to be the first past the post back when the fandom had its big swell in the 11s and 12s.
Yes, very much so.
Definitely, I think Pink Eyes probably wouldn't have been as popular had it not been in that particular time period, and I don't think Heroes would have been as popular if it wasn't. I don't think it was bad, but I think it was. I have been other fics that got less acclaim that were probably better. It just mine happened to be of a good enough quality at the exact right time, in the fandom to sort of be caught up in that upswell. So timing in this case was really everything.
Timing is always important.
Yeah, sometimes people come up to me and they'll go, "So how do you make, a story like that big?" And I'm like, "Well, first what you need is a time machine."
uh, the formula is a time machine, uh, a very active Twitter following in the past, uh, and a lot of luck. Huge
And
gallons
the
of luck. You need to bring in whole tanker loads of luck.
the luck is very important, and knowing the right people. So, to go into a little bit of inside baseball, when Heroes was first got onto Equestria Daily, which is really what made it big in a lot of ways. Back when that was more of it was a lot bigger. Back when this site first came out, because it was like the only site. Basically, there was the FOE, and then there was Project Horizons, which got its own page, and then there was sort of an upswell to get other stories in Equestria Daily, and the people who were manning Equestria Daily said we don't really want to, because they didn't like that it was more of a like a gory nature, like sort of dark nature, and Equestria Daily wanted to keep more of an upbeat attitude about it at that time.
Mm.
But eventually we complained enough. They said, okay. It was talking to, I believe it was the owner of the FOE website, and said, go up and come up with 3 stories. I think there's 2 or 3 stories that are well acclaimed, and those stories will get their own page, and everything else will be put in a large page. So my story ended up being popular enough with enough people who were talking to him that it ended up getting its own page over other stories that was sort of in the same running for it. And that being in the right spot at the right time and having the right people already like the story sort of allowed it to get onto there and sort of become one of the big 5, as they call it, for some reason.
Yes, though I do want to argue that the fic that shall not be named, um, I don't think necessarily belongs there just for the so many contrary and contradictory elements of the story.
The fic that should not be named?
Yes, the it begins with P and ends in Eisens.
Nah. That was an interesting case. So, inside baseball here again. If you were in the fandom when it first came out, the reason it got its own page was essentially because the combined page that we had at the time, where all the stories were sort of thrown in and no one really looked at, the comment section was 100% Project Horizons, and people were complaining because there wasn't any space for other stories to be talked about in the comment section because it was all about Project Horizons, and that's how it ended up getting its own page because people wanted that page, that comment section free. So,
Mm.
so it was incredibly popular, and I think in a sense you're not going to put something. It's going to get its own page, not necessarily because of how good it is, but of how popular it is. And I think most people who don't like it still thought like the beginning parts of it was still pretty good. It just sort of went off the rails later on.
It kind of did, and I have gone through all of it, and well, suffice to say, it was a ride. It was
Hey, you went through
Sombra's
more than
wild
I
ride,
did.
and I wanted to get off the train.
Uh, I got off the train. It was actually quite easy for me to get off the train. It was around Stygius, actually, but we're not talking about it.
Yes, let's try and avoid talking about that because it's basically the boomer meme of this faction of this whole fandom. Uh, People bad, PH bad. Uh, so yeah, I believe this is probably a good point to call a short musical break. We'll be back shortly after this number is finished, and well, surprisingly enough, it's PH related. And we're back. And welcome back to the show, everyone. So
Thank you, thank
let's
you.
get into our meat and potatoes, hay and oats, the main segment of the show. the lore discussion, everyone's favorite game show.
Oh boy.
If you will bear with me. So, we have a good number of topics available tonight. Quite a large number.
Pick the best one.
All right. That will be one of our favorite friends inside the chat is going to love this particular topic, and it's a doozy of a topic. The Zeebs.
Oh boy.
It's a big un, boys. It's a big un. Now, where do we even begin with a topic like this? What
I got some thoughts on the Zeebs. If you don't mind. So I kind of hate the way they're portrayed in the main fic. It at first I didn't really care because, like I said, I hadn't really played the games. But after playing the games, it's really strange how demonized they are in the story, because in Fallout itself, like the Chinese, them being evil is like partly true, but a lot of it you can't really tell because of how much the xenophobia and patriotism of America at the time sort of made them into these monsters they really could not possibly be.
Basically, what happens when McCarthyism has over a century to do its business?
Exactly. And then in FOE itself, it's like, no, they're actually just that bad. What got me the most was how the story actually showed you who started the war, like the Great War, the Megaspell Exchange. Because in Fallout, it's left incredibly vague
Well,
who
there's
actually
a
started.
few competing theories on who started the war. Like if you believe Mothership Zeta, aliens started the war. They're the ones to blame for everything.
And then there was a hint in Fallout 4 was that robot with the railroad, and then a few other. But the point being is that nobody really knows, and in the end, it kind of doesn't matter who started the war, which made it really strange to me that FOE went, no, it was some bad guys, they did it. And to me, it's like, it just felt like really kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but it was like, kind of took away a lot from the complexity of it.
Yeah, I can see that. So, one thing I'm going to give heaping praise on to Somber for is that he did do zebras really, really well. He made them much more complex, even if, at least in PH, some of them, well, I say some of them, the organization that they are a part of doesn't make any sense when you take into consideration his then later fic Homelands.
Yeah. See also his treatment of the Enclave. At least they weren't outright, well, moronic, dumb, stupid. You know.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like like I said, I stopped reading Project Horizons. Not early on, but it was like right around when Stygius was introduced for various reasons. So a lot of the Zebra stuff I didn't actually end up seeing. So I saw some of it with what's his name, the assassin dude, but that was really about it in terms of Zebra content until later stuff.
Lancer.
But Lancer, that was his name. Assassin dude. But even then, you could tell there was a little bit of thought put into it because even in FOE, zebras are always the enemy, except for one zebra who's a good person, but is like the least developed out of the entire main cast, and it seems like she was put there mainly as a.
Yeah, Zenith. Like everyone makes the joke that Zenith is basically a cardboard cutout with stripes.
Essentially, like, and she got the least amount of character development out of any of the characters. So it did feel like Zebra was sort of like they were there as the enemy, and then other fics sort of took that and went, well, there had to be more to them. And Project Horizons did that a little bit. And I'm sure there was other fics as well that sort of tried to make that more complex.
Speaking of zebras, there will be a question I want to ask you in the next break about zebras in Heroes, but I'm not going to mention it here because spoilers for people who haven't read it yet.
Oh, come on.
Anywho, so I have the stuff here. How do you think they're like? How different do you really think they could have been? Like, obviously, Homelands and PH have expressed it one way. What would like? How would you interpret them from your own fiction's perspective, or how you generally see them? Like, how do you feel about their culture, economy, military, religion, anything like that about them? Anything that
Right.
you
So
found was an interesting thought that you presented?
right. So zebras don't really get much of a presence in Heroes at all. Um, it's kind of by design because it wasn't really about them. But I think it's difficult because I don't want to stray too far from the main fic, but a lot of what the main fic did I didn't really like. And a lot of what the fandom does I didn't really like either because often it seemed like people were like, all right, the zebras, so they have to be African in some nature. And also Roman for reasons I haven't quite figured out. That people are sort of like, yeah, we're gonna make them Roman.
I think it's
And
because they want to make them like Caesar's Legion from
yeah,
Fallout New Vegas,
yeah, and I
which
kind of got that, but
I'm somewhat
see,
guilty of in another capacity. That's changing soon, but more on that on another later date.
and I mean, I even did that myself. In the one reference I gave, I believe I called the home city, the capital city, Rome or something like that, but like spelled weird because you got to be cool.
I
But
believe that is like in universe canon because I believe KCAT wrote it as their capital was Rome, but obviously people have gone and interpreted that notably different across different fics.
yeah. So I use that as well. I don't remember if it was in the fic, if it was in one of her blogs, but I think you are right about that. In my interpretation, I think what you want to do, I think, to make it work the best is don't really explain what the like to me that I don't have a lot of interest in what the original zebra culture was about because I don't think that's interesting. I think it's interesting to see how the ponies observed them and sort of see how the expat zebras who lived within Equestria, how they were, what their culture was like, how they dealt with the racism, and I think that's a more interesting topic. Because
Yeah,
the zebras could be anything. Nobody has any freaking clue because they're barely in there at all. So they could be anything. So you can make anything up. But what's interesting is how, like, the canon representation of how Equestria saw the zebras and how they reacted to that representation, I think is a lot more of an interesting topic.
well, something that I've thought of myself. Uh, this is somewhat drawing upon what Sombra did. Like, there are the 12 and the 1 in his fic. It shouldn't
Mhm.
be as any kind of spoiler, not really. There's like 12 different tribes, and then there's one other tribe which did some bad shit. I also interpreted that expat zebras effectively form their own tribe with common uh, cultural bonds between them apart from wherever they came from. Obviously, they have some influences from the tribes they came from before, but have more in common with equestrians than they do with where they came from.
Yeah, I think that'd probably be the best way to do it. It kind of makes sense based on this what we've seen of zebras in the show, which is very, very little actually. It makes sense to sort of give them sort of an African travel route, I suppose. And I've never read Project Horizons or Homelands far enough to get into the zebra stuff. My understanding is it was kind of they had I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Black Panther where they had the different tribes and then one of the tribes was off on their own because they didn't like it and all the tribes were united under one guy. That was sort of the impression I got from it, based on what people have told me. And I guess that makes sense if that's what you're gonna do. The Roman thing I always thought was kind of silly, but
Well,
in terms of expats,
the Roman
sorry?
aspect has been incorporated as one of the tribes is very militaristic and Roman in nature, but it's not the only part of their culture. It's a singular part.
Right, and it definitely gives them more complexity there. Um, Really, it's very strange just how little there is actually about zebras in the fic. If you were going off of just the original story's canon.
Indeed. There's pretty much nothing. Like they're just generic bad guys that shoot people with magic guns.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a bit of kind of a wonkiness you get from incorporating a post-war faction from the games into a pre-war faction.
Oh, you mean Caesar's Legion and then making them the Chinese, essentially, if we're talking about it.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, but see, I don't even think K-Cat did that. I think what she did was literally nothing. And then other people, without anything else, were like, well, how are we going to make this make sense? Or what from the games can we take to put onto the zebras? Because there wasn't really anything in the main fic to go off of, but people liked how they looked and like their fire guns. So like, we want them in my stories, but what we can take from the games to make them work, and that's sort of where the wonkiness I do agree came in.
Though going briefly back to how their culture would differ, or at least something that could be considered for future fics going forward, if anyone wants to listen to the ramblings of three dudes on the internet streaming over Twitch. Like equestrian-born zebras probably would have no reason to be scared of Nightmare Moon, because I believe it was mentioned in the original fic that they really, really, really hate Nightmare Moon and Luna by extension.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't understand that, to be honest. Like, it's that they thought she was the devil, the moon was evil.
This is somewhat relating to zebra mythology as presented at the time in the show, being somewhat distrustful of the stars and the moon.
Yeah, I haven't seen, because it was back the original season, so it's been a while since I even watched the original Offensive Magic season, because I don't recall them being distrustful of that, but I can't remember well enough. Like in the original, the season 1, which is where KK got all of her stuff from, because that's when she wrote it.
I mean, it was Zecora introducing Nightmare Moon as this long-standing evil back in, the Luna and Pipsqueak episode.
Yeah,
I've completely blacked out on what the episode was called.
That was the Nightmare Night, but that was actually in season 2, and I do believe the story had already been finished by the time that episode came out. Or at least it was close.
No. I'm pretty sure the
Lunar Eclipse.
Lunar Eclipse was one of the early episodes, and I believe the fic was started being written towards the end of season 1,
right?
And was all the stuff about Luna and the reasons why zebras were fighting the war was done partway through season 2 after Luna eclipsed.
It's possible. I can't recall the exact timeline anymore because it was a while ago. It is possible, but in which case, what was the reasons of the war before that episode came out? That's sort of, it's curious. And what was K-Cat's plan before Lunar Eclipse actually came out for the zebras?
I don't know.
And why
I probably will never know. K-Cat is a very private person and probably won't be able to tell us anything about this.
Well, I'm just curious now because I recall that most of this story came out in season 1, but there was a few things from season 2. So.
And in addition to that, death of the author.
Well, I still see that, equestrian diaspora zebras probably wouldn't be so distrustful of these things, and probably wouldn't really. It'd be probably the loudest voices for telling zebras, calm down. She's not actually going to end the universe. She just wants to fight this war with you.
Oh, is that all?
Not sure how this makes anything better, but it means this is not an ideological thing. This is purely for resources.
Yeah. I mean, that would make sense partly, but at the same time, you would imagine that as the war got on and as the Zebras were treated worse, they got put into ghettos and stuff. They'd become a lot more distrustful of ponies in general.
Yeah,
So
that
I can
was
sort of see
that
them
was
in their desperation, sort of clinging on to old traditions and old beliefs because they got nothing else to hold on to.
yeah, that does seem like a very poor thing to do. But there we go. It's what the old world did. It's what they did. So moving briefly on, uh, this is mostly just headcanon for me and how I feel the zebra military would operate. They strike me as being more self-reliant. So they would be trying to act with minimal supplies and fending off the land, as it were, taking from the enemy. This is just my headcanon, of course, and there's not much to go on it anyway, but conversation topic at this point.
Um, it's entirely possible, I suppose. I've never really thought about it that much. I'm not super. I I've never written anything that's taken place like during the war, and I've never had a lot of interest in writing anything like that because I feel I, I I feel when it comes to like Fallout stuff, part of the interest in it is what happens after something the big bad thing happens. Like how do you rebuild? So I'm not super interested personally, like what the mechanics of the war were, or who did what when, or how they fought. Because in a lot of ways, in the actual stories, they don't matter because it was so long ago. It doesn't matter who fought or why they fought, only the result of it, which I think is in large part the point. So it's entirely possible they were more decentralized in the military, and you did sort of get that impression from like the that one attack on Luna School and stuff like that. But to me, it almost doesn't matter for most fics because it was so long ago.
I suppose, yeah. The war has long since passed, any fic, so it makes little difference. I believe we've somewhat exhausted this topic. Let's find our next one. Can't do that one. That's already been done last week.
I wasn't here last week.
Can't do that one. That was done last week too.
Somebody got all the good topics ahead of me.
Is this dice roller just picking the numbers we've already done already? All right. Here's a better one. Vehicles in FOE. To what
Yeah.
extent should they exist? Are they like the Fallout games where they should be very minimal? Or do you think that they should take a more prominent place and be used more often?
Well, very minimal in what Fallout games? I believe Fallout was it Fallout 2? You just got a car and just
Fallout 2,
abandoned it?
yes.
You had to get the parts for that and feed it fuel, and yeah, you could have a car if you wanted to.
That was a good time. I remember losing all my stuff because I lost it in a random encounter. I, I, I honestly like vehicles kind of make sense in a lot of ways. So it depends on it depends on a number of things. So in this sense, it does sort of depend on what your conception of the like what Equestria was like before the war. Did they have vehicles at all? Like I know Project Horizons have tanks, but I don't believe that's actually canon. And a lot of the vehicles in FOE proper are pulled by ponies. Like the cart was pulled by Calamity, and I think even the train at the beginning was pulled by the horses, like the
Yes,
original
that was because
Appaloosa episode.
silly people thought that pulling a horse-drawn train with the whole engine there with a perfectly serviceable boiler was sensible.
Yeah, that was based off the original Appaloosa episode before they started having trains without that. So it kind of depends on what your depiction of what the technology was ahead of time. But in a lot of ways, and when it talks about a story, it's whether or not the vehicle serves the story. whether or not using it as a crutch, whether or not it sort of makes sense within the story. So it could go either way. I think there's some stories where having a vehicle would rob a lot of the tension. And there's others where
I
if it's taking place
I
over a wide area, it can add to tension. Sorry.
I talk about this more from a perspective of well, more like tech level rather than necessarily devices for fiction writing. Because from what we've seen, most of the vehicles that are shown at any point are horse-drawn, which to an extent does make some sense. But we also have to consider the fact that this is a somewhat technological setting, and almost certainly personal modes of transportation will exist.
Yeah, honestly, I'm always more interested in how something serves the narrative. That being said, if we're talking about tech levels, it makes sense for vehicles to exist if you want them to. It's really easy to justify. It's a post-industrial setting. You got a lot of technology, weaponry. They're going to need vehicles to go to war. You're going to need supply trains if you're in a war, and supply trains are best fed by vehicles or trains. And in that sense, it's easy to justify if you want it, but if you don't want vehicles for whatever reason, you could also justify that because you could think about what's supplying the power to the vehicle. And if you don't want vehicles in your setting, whatever you think supplies the power to that vehicle, they don't have. That being said, a lot of it had. I'm guessing most vehicles were probably coal powered, if I remember my FOE lore
That is
correctly.
correct. Just one big thought that popped into my head. A really big plot point I think KCAT didn't consider. Equestria has huge ancient forests.
Mhm.
And what can you do with huge ancient forests?
Cut them down. I'm not sure.
Yes, you can cut them down and you can make charcoal.
Yeah, but
And
why would you
even
do
if
that if you can just get them from? Well, and the forest was cursed.
oh
And
yeah, sure, like you avoid the Everfree Forest, but what about the rest of them?
I think in many ways it's probably best not to go looking too deep for plot holes in FOE because you might get lost in them. It's an imaginative fic, but in many ways not very thought out. And if we're looking for plot holes like that, there's probably plenty you can find.
Like this is the same species of people who grew an apple tree in the desert in less than a year. Just reminding you and the audience of this point.
Plus, there's plenty of technical stuff that authors just might not even be aware of when they're starting out. Like I seem to recall someone asking Dr. Ham, why did his protagonist Alloy go through the swamp to trade for coal when she actually could have, dried out the peat from the swamp and used that as fuel like people have historically used, just stuff that you didn't even realize when you started writing the fic that was technically completely plausible and possible and easier to do than the thing that you are establishing as the fuel route.
That's true as well, and I think in a lot of ways, you can almost get too caught up in trying to make the story realistic in that way. But it's not a realistic story. And getting too caught up in sort of the realism aspect of, well, why don't you just use peat from the swamp or tear down the everfree forest and harvest it for train fuel? It's like they could have done that, but then you wouldn't really have a story. And it's just not super important to the story as a whole. I feel
I know
because
it's
it's
not
not a realistic
important.
story.
I'm not poking holes in this uh, because I have a problem with it narratively speaking. It's fine. It's a narrative device. My problem with it is that I am just a brainlet, and this is a better plan than no plan. And responding to the chat briefly, which I know I shouldn't do, I'm breaking my own rules here. Rebel, Seeing as Equestria couldn't produce any coal of its own, or had very limited coal reserves of its own, producing at least part of your fuel source yourself is a 100% improvement over producing none of it yourself.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I mean, yeah. Like, in a large way, like, ponies are trusting. No, they're just dumb. But by the time the world ended, as it were, the technology level has far exceeded coal completely.
I mean, somewhat.
Like,
it's still argued that most civilian power at that point was still produced by coal-fired plants.
Right, but I think part of what the story was going for wasn't necessarily that it was fought over coal, but it started over coal, and then continued on its own due to propaganda. So by the end of the war, it wasn't really about coal anymore, and it wasn't really about magic rocks. It was about killing them.
It was an ideological war in the end.
Killing the enemy / not having the world end because of Nightmare Moon or whatever, right? Like, it stopped being about that thing. Hey, what if we don't want to go to a new topic?
Stop responding to the chat. We have to not do that.
Sorry, he's getting my goat. And yeah, like, and part of it to me is like, the technology level is so inconsistent that you can pretty much make anything you want out of it.
All right, now we'll go for a new topic. Okay, then. This is going to be a bit more fun topic, a bit more upbeat topic. It's somewhat meme-y.
Oh,
Clipboard
boy.
armor. Is it a meme or is it a realistic armor choice?
Sorry, what was that?
Clipboard armor. Is it a meme?
Clipboard armor.
Or is it just a realistic armor choice?
I mean, it would probably be very effective against, like, I have no idea. I mean, who knows what they made those clipboards out of, right? Like, they were pretty sturdy in the game as well. Like, you could probably knock someone out with that. Like, yeah, use it as your hammer, why not? And, you know, it's part of the whole Fallout aesthetic is to strap various things to your body and call it armor. So why not clip?
Yes, but the only reason that clipboards aren't destructible is because Bethesda engines and games, like, they should be totally breakable. And it's just, I believe it was just a meme that carried over. Because, fuck, these clipboards are more resilient than my body is. I'll strap them to my body now.
I mean, FOE is basically made in the Bethesda engine.
Yeah, it's just a gameplay meme, you know, kind of like with Half-Life, where if you levitate an object right between your line of sight and the enemy, they suddenly can't see you anymore, and you're stealthy because you're just blocking your own line of sight to them.
And yeah, so I think that I kind of like it as a joke because I feel like a lot of stories try to take themselves a bit too seriously. It's always good to have a little bit of levity, because when it comes down to it, it's an inherently silly concept to begin with. So you don't want to take it too seriously, so you might as well have clipboard armor, make a little bit of a joke out of it, and then sort of throw it away when things get serious. And I think that's fine. It's amusing. You gotta have some fun.
Yeah. Some of the like that's just something that tends to happen a lot with the way the fans interpret Fallout Equestria. They just kind of forget the tongue-in-cheek aspect of Fallout and just go for, you know, the edge sometimes.
Yeah,
I think that's definitely true.
Let's be fair. Online fandoms are somewhat predisposed to being edgy. Don't think that's a contentious statement to make, I'll be honest.
I feel like you're probably correct. Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a predisposition towards being edgy and sort of not getting that a lot of what Fallout was doing was tongue in cheek.
Like the Fallout originally was all uh, gallows humor and a dark reality.
Yeah,
And
definitely. And sorry.
And Fall of Equestria, while definitely tried to get the Fallouty dark vibe and mixed it with a very noble, bright world, and came up with something that was arguably somewhere in the middle. A lot more lighter than Fallout, but darker than MLP has any right to be, without becoming ridiculous. But
yeah, no, and I think the tongue in cheek is important because I feel like FOE kind of had a decent balance, although a lot of its jokes would a lot of FOE's jokes ended up being just season 1 memes, which is just stopped being funny after a while. But they can't really be blamed for that. But I think you need to have some levity because if you don't have levity, if you don't have a little bit of tongue in cheek, a little bit of humor, then the dark becomes too dark, and like you need a contrast. Because when everything's black, it's really hard to tell what you're supposed to give a shit about. And I know people that Project Horizons did that somewhat, and people had that claim about Murky Number 7 as well at times, that it was so black that you couldn't see what you were supposed to really like. How are you supposed to care if there's no levity, if there's no bits of light? And I think stuff like the clipboard armor, just little jokes like that can do a lot to lighten up the story a little bit and make it just a bit more palatable than having it be all dark all the time. But there's some people who like the edge. We call those people 15.
Yeah. Going back to PH and what the chat is suggesting, yes, PH is a really, really dark and edgy, relatively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone kind of agrees that it was trying to be an anime more than it was trying to be an FOE fic. And if that was the intent, I can't say they didn't succeed.
Oh, I mean, definitely. Like, people always shit on Project Horizons, and there's, I personally don't even like the story. But that being said, I feel like it knew what it was trying to be. I just think it wasn't what people expected it to be when it first came.
I think there's a very particular kind of segment of the fandom that likes FOEPH. They're typically people that enjoy anime, and they came to the fandom because they liked the atmosphere of the fandom over the content.
Yeah, because PH had that more adventurous atmosphere. It had the flashy cybernetics. It has a lot of ability to draw the crowd, and you have to credit it for that. That's what got all the enthusiasm going for the fan art, and admittedly also inspired many others to try their hands or hooves, if you will, at writing their own side fic.
Are we still doing that? We're still doing the hooves thing?
No.
Like that's like a season 3 meme, and that died a long time ago, BG.
Indeed, that was bad, and I should feel bad.
Yeah, and I mean, it's there can be room for more than one type of story, and even if Project Horizons wasn't something I personally enjoyed, I get why people liked it, because it was like an anime. It was like a particularly dark anime, I would say, but it was definitely anime-esque, and anime is incredibly popular, and it had a roving adventure feel. Each chapter was often chapters were like self-contained adventures with like anime boss battles and stuff like that, and you can sort of see the appeal, if that's the sort of thing you like.
Well, we went on a bit of a tangent there.
Yeah, so basically I like clipboard armor.
All right. Probably maybe one, maybe two more questions, and we'll go for another break.
Fine by me.
Nope,
What do you mean this
can't do
episode doesn't have a guest? I'm the guest.
Rude.
Oh, is this a joke about my name?
Yes, of course it's a joke about your name,
Oh,
bud.
they got me. They fucking got me. Damn it. God damn it.
This dice roller is determined to pick a topic that's already been covered on the show already.
I guess no one saw that coming.
Da 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 da. All right, bit more of a heavy topic. That seems it's been a rather heavy episode. We all take a ride on the depression train today.
Choo choo.
Should Canterlot have been destroyed?
Yes. Next question.
Not even going to elaborate on why.
Destroy it all. So is the question, should it have been destroyed more than it was? Or should it, like, are we counting it in the pink cloud as destroyed?
I'm talking more specifically the Operation Quarterize leveling it off the mountain destruction.
Right. Should it have been? Like, or was that like too dark? Not right.
The Enclave destroyed it.
I mean, like, yes, because
Well, you heard it here first, folks. The Enclave was right. The Enclave did nothing wrong.
Okay, so I'm gonna put on my narrative hat again. I think it should have been destroyed. Yeah, they should have had Biden shit. It should have been destroyed in the story because it's a very poignant moment. Because at least, like, especially in the first season, it was like this shining beacon you barely got to, and it was like this really fancy place, sort of the model of all of Equestria, yada yada. And then when you destroy it, it makes a bit of a poignant moment, and sort of brings that emotion into it because it's destroying sort of the last refuge of the old world and all that.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it probably should have been done, like, it was done like off screen in like a backhanded comment or something. Like, it should have been an on screen moment, and I think that would have made it more interesting.
I suppose so, but I'm talking less from a narrative perspective, because I do want to point out this is supposed to be a lore discussion rather than a narrative discussion. I'm talking more for why would they? What kind of benefit was there really from destroying it? Wouldn't it make more sense from a lore perspective and maybe an in-universe narrative perspective to have basically kept it there and rebuilt it in its old image, even with the amount of time, effort, and resources it would have taken to do so? Because I believe the Enclave kind of exemplify that the old world ideas can still work.
Mm-hmm. You have to forgive me. When I hear a question, my first thought is, how does it affect the narrative? Because that's what I always find the most interesting. But from a lore perspective, that's what we're going to talk about. Sure, but because the Enclave isn't going to reclaim the ground. They never really had any intention of reclaiming the ground. And from my understanding, Canterlot was below the cloud line, thus the Enclave would never rebuild it. So they have no reason to keep it. And furthermore, the Enclave was ideologically opposed to Earth ponies and unicorns when it was first created, because they overutilized Pegasi during the war. Thus, the Pegasi don't really have a lot of emotional attachment to a unicorn-led settlement. So there would be no reason, if it was in their best interest, which I guess they felt it was because they're dicks, to destroy it. So there would be no reason for them not to destroy it.
Well, the thing is that I'm not entirely convinced that they had no intention to come back down. Like, obviously, that eventually their population would get so big they'd have no other choice. Because as far as I understand, while there are population controls, the population is very slowly ticking up.
Yeah, we can just yeet people until it gets back down again. This is a joke.
Yes, it is
yeah,
a joke. Armex is the joke.
Yeah, you could definitely say, well, eventually they're gonna have to go back down. But even if they went back, they are gonna want to come back down on their own terms, in their own image. They're all very nationalistic, Pegasi first, yada yada. They're still not gonna give a shit about a unicorn settlement. Even if it was their previous capital, they sort of built the whole identity as being apart from the other guys, which is why, like, apart from the other races, which is why I think they would not care. Because Canterlot to them was more of a symbol of their oppression than anything else.
Well, that's one way of putting it, and that was an interesting perspective, at least from my eyes. I don't think I've ever seen anyone put it quite that way. I believe this is...
I'm very...
Oh, sorry, you make your point.
Oh, that doesn't matter. Keep going, sorry.
I was going to suggest that we break for a short musical break.
Sure, people love music, especially Amex.
All right, then. We'll be back shortly after this next musical number. See you very shortly.
Push it back into the ground from whence it came, no more be found. Hide it deep and hide it low, don't get confused, don't wanna know. All this nonsense in the air, it makes me sick, it leaves me bare. You can have your fantasy, but you won't lay this one on me. Yeah. I know the end isn't nearing, I can see it in your eyes. And though your words seem sincere enough, I can filter through your lies. Poison words loose from your lips as sly as snakes, your evil tricks. You won't fool me with your words, won't be so quick to join that herd. I won't play your little game, won't let your lies destroy my brain. In the end, I'll take you down, I'll leave you dead there on the ground. I know the end isn't nearing, I can see it in your eyes. And though your words seem sincere enough, I can still turn through your lies. Poison words loose from your lips and sly snakes, your evil tricks. You won't fool me with your words, I'll join the herd. I won't play your little game, won't let your lies destroy my brain. In the end, I'll bring you down, I'll leave you dead there on the ground.
And we're back. How was everyone doing in our absence? Don't have to answer that question, Armex, because you'll answer it with a meme.
They're basically Lord of the Flies right now. They've formed different camps. I think they killed Amex and now eating him. It's a pretty terrible situation in there.
Well, suffice to say, unfortunately, I've not received any mail since the last episode and now. So, once again, we open the floor for questions.
Oh, for the chat gets to ask questions now?
The chat gets to ask questions, either of you, of all of us, whatever they want to ask.
Now, can the questions be spoilers?
I suppose they can ask, but you're not required to answer.
Oh, I don't mind. I just don't want to spoil something. Alright, so we gotta keep on talking. Gotta keep something going on as they figure out questions.
Indeed. I was hoping that there'd be some questions, sent in, but clearly I was...
Here's the first question. Would I kiss a ghoul? Yes. Next question.
Well, perhaps we should also extend the question to the rest of us on the show. Pinky, what about yourself?
Yes, as long as they're not the gnawing my face off type.
I think maybe. It would be a definite maybe. It would matter an awful lot on the ghoul in question. So, next question from the audience. While I try and find something else to fill the gap.
I'm glad to know all necrophiliacs. Yeah, that's awesome.
Who doesn't love some tasty necrophilia?
Oh boy. Hum. Well, of course, we're seriously answering the question. We have to ask that. What do you think makes a ghoul, well, a ghouly goo? What the fuck does that mean?
Well, that can mean a lot of things.
How many evil campaigns have I run? What you mean? You mean like in Fallout, or like PnP?
I imagine he's referring to PnP.
I've never run an evil campaign. I'm a GM for my group, and I've run like 2 complete campaigns, and I'm currently doing a 3rd. And I've been a part of a few other ones, and I've never been evil because I feel bad when I am evil.
Well, you heard it here first. He's too nice to be evil.
But it's an interesting question, I think, because I do like PnPing, and I've just to me a lot. I just don't find it that interesting being particularly evil, because being evil is incredibly difficult. So I don't think that it's very interesting to be. Sorry, being evil is incredibly easy. It's very easy to be evil in an RPG game. It's a lot more difficult to be good effectively, which I think is more interesting.
I'm not entirely convinced. Like, it's very easy to be the mustache-twirling evil bastard in a PnP. That's easy, super easy. But to be an evil person but be complex at the same time, now that is a much harder trick to pull off.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. Whether or not the PnP even allows for that's another thing entirely. But personally, I like you could do some stuff with that. I just personally really haven't really felt the need. I've played morally ambiguous characters, but nobody I would really call evil, and I wouldn't say any of the campaigns themselves were designed around being evil.
All right. Let's actually answer Nexus's question. What do you think makes a ghoul, well, a ghouly goo?
I don't know what that means. What is a ghouly goo?
Maybe a
Perhaps
ghoul who lives in Goo Lagoon?
Oh, why are ghouls ghouls? He actually explains it later on as a question mark.
yeah. Well, I believe like in canon universes
Magic.
is magic. I believe they get exposed to just the right amount of necromantic magic to both kill them and trap their soul in this body.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, it's
Like in
necromancy,
Fallout,
so
everyone there is mostly just the amount of radiation you get exposed to. It's a lot of radiation over a period of time rather than all at once, because people don't tend to turn into ghouls because they get basically just bathed in loads of radiation all at once. That just straight up kills people typically. It's a initial burst and then long-term exposure.
hmm yeah, that sounds about right to me. I've never really thought about it that much, to be honest with you. To me, my answer is it's magic, and I try not to think about it too deeply. I'm just gonna get frustrated.
I like thinking about this. I want to actually delve a bit deeper into this, if you'll all indulge me here in the chat and here on the show.
By all means.
I always found that ghouls aren't as developed as they probably should be, to be honest. Like, obviously, there is like the few things that about how ghouls become from normal, reasonable people that don't go thinking to themselves, how can I best chew off my neighbor's face? And then go, Rarg, I want to eat you, in less words. There seems to be, at least in FOE, it seems to be that. Yes.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting. Like, what I would find interesting is sort of like, what would a ghoul think of all that? Like, they must be fully aware that they could, at some point in their life, just snap and become feral.
I imagine
And
that's
how
utterly terrifying.
how much must that fuck them up? And would thinking about it make it more likely to happen because they're so fucked up about it?
Yes, it would, because at least in Fallout, ghouls that despair are more likely to become ferals than those who have a strong sense of either community or have a strong personal force of will. Basically, having someone to either understand, either empathize with your situation or accepts you for who you are, makes it more likely that you don't become a feral ghoul. And when you mention Moira Brown should be fucking dead. The only reason that she gets turned into a ghoul is because Bethesda wants you to fucking finish their quest, and Bethesda can go fuck themselves.
Oh, come on, ain't she just the most likable little psychopath in Fallout 3?
She's a psychopath. I mean, I instantly dislike her, so she can just go away and she could die in a ditch. I tried to kill her and she didn't die.
Oh, come on, don't you just love when she tells you she even stitched a little smiley face inside you?
Technically, I want to point out that just going into her shop, putting a gun to her head and blowing her brains out had more consequence than blowing up the entirety of the town with a nuke. Just pointing that out there.
I mean, yeah, but Fallout 3 is a bad game.
Now, I'm not going to say that Fallout 3 is a bad game. I'm just saying that
I will.
it could have been better.
I have so many issues with Fallout 3, but
Suffice to say, I imagine, at least in canon, and you can disagree with me if you like, no one, ghouls exist as they are is because they've got somewhere between the right amount and the wrong amount of necromantic energy from balefire bombs or whatever kind of mega spell has attempted to kill them to effectively kill them, but not. Because I believe it's referenced in a few different fics that there's different kinds of ghouls depending on the mega spell in question that killed them.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're going into the lore, I mean, K-Cat's been pretty clear that all mega spells have a, like, I forget what she called it, something, but after effect. So you use it, and it does its main effect, and then there's like an after effect that comes after it, like magical radiation based on whatever the spell was. Then she's made it pretty clear that all mega spells have that effect. It's just necromantic is a bit more powerful because it's a really powerful type of magic. But like theoretically, any mega spell could create something like a ghoul. But I think actually I don't know, because like the necromantic one is special because ghouls were created specifically because it's necromantic, right? Like they were trapped in their bodies but also died, and that's why they're there.
Yes.
And how would you do that without necromancy?
My argument against that is Pink Cloud, because that generates its own kind of ghouls, and that's an entirely different mega spell.
Was it not also necromantic though? I thought it was explicitly necromantic as well, but I could be wrong.
I'm not sure specifically how it works. I don't remember how it works. It's one of those few things of the fic that just wandered from my memory, but I'm not sure what it actually is in nature.
Right. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. It's entirely possible. I'm not sure. Right. Nexus seems to think Pink Cloud is very definitely necromantic. It's just possible. But I mean, theoretically, why not? You can have a ghoul for anything. Or at the very least have somebody imbued with magical radiation from a mega spell that makes them not necessarily a ghoul, something.
I mean, probably the ghoul would be the catch-all term for Balefire or mega spell survivor altered by its effects. So
yeah, it could be.
Like I believe it's mentioned in both PH and for Homelands, because we just love bringing up somber stuff on here. That there were ghouls that are like living rock. That they were creatures that exposed to this particular kind of mega spell, and they became creatures of rock that tried to kill you and eat you.
Yeah. I've never read Homeland, so it's entirely possible to have it in there. And I mean, like, if it makes sense for the story, I'm not really going to complain. I've never been really a huge stickler for lore in terms of what does and doesn't make sense in the setting, because you can explain a lot away in the setting. But it makes as much sense as anything if we're talking about radiation like that. Yeah. But I've never actually thought about it like that. And in my fic, as you're well aware, the only real people affected by mega spells are people much more affected by them. But
Yeah, let's not give spoilers for obvious reasons for those who haven't had the great fortune to have read Heroes up until any point.
they should have read it by now. Come.
Nah. I keep getting given feedback about this. Don't put spoilers in here because you're having fun and you know things. So
You'd be surprised how many people actually do get pissed about spoilers for chapters that have been out for like years already, but yeah. It's personal preferences, I guess.
I suppose. But, I mean, they're first reference.
Like, I know they've had plenty of time, and that just means they're lazy. Yes, I'm looking at all of you who have not read it yet. Yes, I'm looking at myself. I should feel ashamed. I am. But point being, you're right. At least in your fic, the effects of mega spells are more in the here and now, and not mutations on long-term effects. Concerns like that.
Well, so how am I going to talk about this if I can't give spoilers for my own fic? If anyone's listening right now and don't want to hear spoilers, for chapter 20 of Heroes that came out in 2012, which is what I'm going to be spoiling right now. So if you don't want to hear those, please mute yourself now. But it came out 7 years ago. So, in Heroes, there was specifically a being that specifically had a mega spell fused into them. And that had an incredible effect on who they were as a person and how it had an effect. And not necessarily a ghoul, because it was a lot different than that, but it was definitely an effect that it had, and it does show sort of the after effects. So in that chapter, the Silverstorm, Hired Gun, whatever, has a number of visions of the past, specifically because of the radiation from the mega spell inside of that particular person, because it was specifically a time mega spell. So they were getting visions of things that happened in the past due to the radiation. That's sort of how I played it. Often that's how that radiation from that particular effect worked. But I didn't really think of having like someone be affected as a ghoul in that sense. Mostly they just died.
All right. Are there any more questions in the chat?
Oh, there was some questions. What were the questions? Will I write a 0.5 chapter for Hero? No. How one-hoofed guns would operate, considering they are mouth-held? They wouldn't.
My response to that is that no, mouth holding is silly.
Don't think about it. And so is Battle Saddles. Don't think about it.
No, battle saddles are much, much better. They're good.
Have you, do you have a lot of experience with guns?
Some experience, yes.
Okay. In my experience, it's would be very difficult to aim a battle saddle. Pretty much anyway. If you don't know, we don't understand recoil. But it would be incredibly difficult, just based on how they operate. On your back, you don't have a lot of aim. It'd be so difficult to aim, so difficult to point them, because you'd have to like maneuver your entire body towards whatever thing you're trying to pinpoint aim at. You wouldn't have a lot of flexibility in how you aim it. It would be very difficult, because you want very precise aiming.
I understand that, but I'd argue that this is more a device of, how do I put? It's not necessarily for precision. Like I've seen some designs for a battle saddle where you have like an arm that comes out of it, which aims the gun over your eye for you.
Yes, in fact, I think.
A certain Morning Glory fan art comes to mind.
No, and that's right, and I believe Heroes actually. I had talked about something like that in the story. But it's not about the aiming through the scope. It's about maneuvering the weapon effectively, which would not be very effective on your back. That being said, sorry, go ahead.
The fact is, though, it's still arguably better than mouth holding.
Oh, 100%.
And it would make sense that a creature that hasn't got typically appendages that can have fine manipulation, this is a massive improvement over trying to use your tongue to fire a gun.
Oh, yes. Now, that being said, so this is something I've talked about with the authors from time to time in various places. Well, they talk about what you do for fight scenes, like, do you want to make it realistic? And my answer to them is, no, you don't want to make a FOE fight scene realistic when you're writing it, because it is inherently not realistic. So yes, a battle saddle makes more sense than a mouth-held weapon, but in reality, there's really no way to make a four-legged creature use a weapon that isn't inherently silly and unworkable. So in my view, you just don't think about it. You just go with the flow. You try to make it work for the story, but don't get too deep into the how and the whys and the what's its, because the more you look into how something like that would actually operate, the less real, the more obvious it is that it doesn't really work out. So you want to leave stuff like that, in my view, kind of vague, because in practice, it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
I'd argue that in most circumstances, though, weapons are just hoof-held. They're literally just hoof-held.
Yeah, but then you have them going up on their hind legs to shoot, or it's... to me, it's very... My view of it is that if we're talking about like realism, it makes no sense. But considering they're basically cartoons, it can work. Why not?
Well, obviously, we are suspending at least some of our disbelief here. This is already fiction.
Exactly.
It doesn't seem like a massive step in the great scheme of things.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
So,
it's just... Yeah, just think of it as a cartoon. Just think of them shooting that like how Pinkie Pie shoots her, party rocket launcher. I guess they hop up on their hind legs and use their sticky forehooves.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So people are like, how do you do a fight scene in like FOE? I'm like, you don't want to make it realistic because it's not realistic. You want to you have to be aware when you're writing it that it's not going to be real. Because it won't be, and that's fine. Because why would it be? I think that's part of the charm.
All right. Any further questions?
But yeah, I just compare that to a certain moment in a PnP campaign that that Gear might also remember. It's high fantasy. So at some point, when you ask the character, "Hey, how does this work? Do you believe in the supernatural?" Just sort of have the unicorn character point at his horn. Well, yeah.
I mean, it's the same way with like Fallout by itself. It's Fallout by itself is science, not science, and that's pretty much by design. Oh, look, there's actual questions.
The two actual questions, and then another meme question from everyone's favorite meme lord, Armex. All right, so what would you change about the Pegasus Enclave if it was up to you?
Oh, what wouldn't I change? So I guess I'll answer first because I like to hear myself talk. I don't like the Vegas Enclave at all. I don't even like what I did with them because I kind of got confused about what my idea was and it didn't end up working very well. Basically, you gotta make them less evil because they're too evil. It's fucking dumb, and that's really what it comes down to. Is what you want to do is first of all not base them off the Enclave and Fallout 3 because they're dumb. You want to make them have some sort of overarching goal that isn't inherently self-destructive. You want them to be introduced earlier in the story so they don't come out of basically nowheres at the 3/4 mark to be the final baddie. And you want to make them have a point. So I feel like cake.
You kind of want to do what Somber did. As we always love bringing that up over and over again.
I'm just saying I didn't bring it up.
Indeed.
So
Sorry, were you going to say something?
It happened again. So if we'll allow ourselves this one, in PH, the Enclave were introduced earlier in the story as being part of an organization known as the Volunteer Corps. They seem to be doing good things, like giving food out to surfacers in exchange for stuff that the Pegasus Enclave need, like scrap and stuff. They don't seem like just straight up evil bad guys. They seem like they're trying to do some good in the world. There's a few instances in that organization who are real bad eggs doing some bad things, which have some quite serious plot points in the story. But suffice to say, the Enclave aren't portrayed as straight up the bad guys in PH.
Fuck, I don't know. Like I said, I haven't finished the story, so I really couldn't tell you. If I recall correctly, but wasn't it them who made the Raider virus or whatever and was distributing it?
In PH, but
Spoiler.
not the main fic.
So there was no Raider virus in the main fic. So
No, I'm talking about PH, yeah.
in PH, the Enclave didn't create the virus, the Raider disease. This was a disease from Zebracan society, where basically tribes that had hit hard times would occasionally consume the dead, and this would occasionally cause a disease to go through their populations, passing from individual to individual through pretty much all forms of transmission. So fluids, blood, pretty much anything. So it would mean that everyone, it's basically just Kuru.
Right. Be that as may, but I'm pretty sure early on they were distributing it, and that was like a major plot point early on.
The thing is, though, is that the Enclave were effectively immune to it because they are the least like zebras.
What? Is that an actual plot point?
That's a plot point. So they are the least like zebras. So zebras are more similar to earth ponies. Earth ponies are similar to unicorns, and Pegasi seem to be like neither.
What? Is that real? God, is he making this up? Because that sounds dumb.
This is a real plot point. So
All
there's a
right.
reason why the reason why Pegasi are effectively immune to the disease is because they are the least like it who it was originally transmitted to. The point was that a individual was trying to develop a version of the disease that could infect the Enclave.
I mean, I guess a less, wonky way of putting it would be they were genetically isolated from, intermixing zebra, unicorn, and earth pony populations. That would have been a way better way to explain it.
It still doesn't make sense. Like, the diseases can spread between species fairly easy. That's why you get things like mad cow disease affecting people, the swine flu, bird flu affecting people, like
I
HIV
believe it's
came from
mentioned it's not
monkeys,
that they
stuff like that.
can't be infected. It's because they are the least genetically similar to zebras. It's almost it's basically a statistical anomaly when they do get affected.
That's interesting. I mean, I'm very curious whose ass that was pulled out of. But sure.
There's also the fact
I guess again,
it's also partly because the disease is partially magical in nature.
So are you gonna say something, BG?
no, never mind. I was just gonna say, pull it's high fantasy, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I only read up to a certain point in Project Horizons, and I know I missed most of the story at a certain point. So there's a lot of stuff that I didn't see. I just recall very early on in the story it seeming like the Enclave were deliberately infecting people with the disease, and that being a plot point. And then I can't recall something about Morning Glory, and then they were still pretty evil as far as I recall in Project Horizons, at least up until the point I read.
Specifically, Operative Lighthooves was really evil. Because it's at least revealed later on that at least the local Enclave faction are not bastards, just Lighthooves is.
I'm sure they're all just following orders.
But yeah, to get back to the question, how to change the portrayal of the Enclave, I mean, really what is kind of missed with that, as was portrayed in New Vegas with the Remnants and Arcade, was, why not portray the families, they're military brats, like families of military members. That is still a community in and of itself. But like also if you think of the countries abroad where you've got military personnel stationed, that is also a sort of tight knit community of people who have to get used to socializing, between being stationed elsewhere every 2 years. So there's an element of that you could aim to portray with them instead of just, for the evils.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, I'm not, a service member myself, so I'm not sure if that's just a completely skewed perception on my part. But
Well, let's try our next question then. What do you like? Do you like the idea of having a Fallout set in New York?
No, I wanted set in Canada.
That might be cool.
It wasn't New York already done by that one Division game? I mean, I guess they could do it in Fallout to make it a bit different. I just think it might be a bit constricting on the type of zones you would have because it'd pretty much be all city. But I think it might be more interesting to have. Like, I don't know, you could do it and I wouldn't be opposed to it. And it could be very interesting, but it wouldn't be my first choice. But as Nex was saying, off Toronto, that's what I want to see.
That would be
'Cause
interesting,
Canada,
yeah.
I want to fight mutant beavers in the Tim Hortons. That's what I want to do, but I might be biased.
I think it might be cool. It would be nice to have it. I actually would like to see just a new setting entirely, but I know I'm not going to get a new setting entirety. So I'm not. I don't think I'll get to see Ronto. I don't think I'll get to see Mexico. I don't think I'll get to see the European Commonwealth because Bethesda doesn't like anywhere other than America. So if it has to be in America, New York might be interesting.
Yeah, well, I think you're never going to see something out of America because a lot of the aesthetics of the Fallout games are Americana patriotism. And it'd be very difficult, I think, to make a Fallout game very Fallouty without that hyper patriotism, American patriotism that sort of makes it. Like it just you'd have to replace that particular aesthetic with something, and I think that would be difficult to do. Another reason why I think Canada would work, and not just because I'm biased, but because I believe in the Fallout universe that Canada was annexed by America, so
That
then
is true.
you could see a lot of that aesthetic, sort of the colonized Canada, perhaps sort of fighting against its oppressors, that sort of aesthetic mixed in with the general Americana propaganda. It might be an interesting sort of backdrop to a Fallout game.
Maybe. I would definitely like to see it, but I don't expect that I will be able to see it.
Probably not. I think you're probably more likely to get somewhere else on the East Coast so they can tie it into their weird overarching story over there.
I mean, a place I would like to see is probably in the Deep South.
I would like to
like
see
Louisiana.
Yeah, I want to see New Orleans.
Yeah, I'd probably like
Yep.
to see New Orleans or like I know that there's a fan project for Fallout Miami, but maybe do Florida. Florida's also cool, or Texas. Do it properly this time.
What do they have in Texas though? Just a lot of desert.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of desert, but well, I say that Texas is a very wide and ranging place with lots of different locales. Just saying that.
Yeah, I know. Everything's bigger in Texas. Yeah, you could do it. I would like to. I would prefer to see somewhere because the thing with you go like Texas and Mexico, places like that, it almost becomes too much like New Vegas almost. So I think I would like to see a new type of climate.
Or
Personally.
perhaps we could go back to places that we've been there before and just do it differently. Like we could go back to Chicago. That was done. I mean, we've already seen the Rockies all the time. That's pretty much where most Fallout games are set. Detroit would be interesting, yeah. But yeah, suffice to say, we look forward to seeing where they'll set the next Fallout game. Hopefully they'll pick an interesting spot. Maybe they
I
will.
believe they set the next Fallout game in space, which was an interesting choice.
What?
Talking about the Outer Worlds.
Oh, well, that's not a Fallout game. Like
It's-
everyone's making the joke that it's a spiritual successor to New Vegas because Mr. House is responsible for all of this.
I don't know about that. I just think like the gameplay is very similar to a Fallout game, so it's got the spirit of that type of game. But that was just a joke. But it would be interesting to see what they do it next. Hopefully Bethesda starts remembering how to make good games at that point. We'll see.
Maybe they won't fuck up. Yeah, that'd be nice. As long as they don't fuck up, everything else is secondary.
Isn't that the dream? As long as they don't fuck up.
Moving on to the next question. What about the stables? What would you change about Stable-Tech and their pointless, contrived evil sciencery?
I have a bone to pick here.
I would change nothing.
I have a bone to pick. Okay, go ahead. But
I would change nothing because they're not evil. They're just straight up not evil.
Nailed it. So this is something I have a lot of issues with whenever I used to read fics, is that they would go Stable-Tech and then Stable-Tech would do something completely fucked up and you're like, why the hell are they doing this? And it doesn't make sense because people didn't really get the memo that Stable-Tech and Vault-Tech are not the same company and have very different
was basically
things.
a shell company for the Enclave. Basically divining information out about the American populace so that they can craft a perfect society. But that's not the same as Stable-Tech. Stable-Tech they are the good guys in this. Like they made the primary directive of every stable that if your experiment is going to harm your residents, drop the fucking experiment, save the fucking residents.
Yeah. And sometimes things went wrong, but it was never it was never seen to be like because of the thing. It was sort of a side thing. At least in the main story. And that's how it was supposed to be, except for the one in Canterlot, which was just deliberately
that was the one deliberate malicious thing that Stable-Tech did.
Yeah, so some of the experiments are probably a bit fucked up and wouldn't pass ethical screening, but they're not deliberately evil like Vault-Tech was. And it always annoys me when I see stories go that way, because it's almost too easy to write a story about a vault that's evil.
Like, once we go back again to PH, Stable 99 was evil, and I grant that. It didn't start evil, though. It became evil. Its residents did that. Stable-Tech didn't tell them to do what they did. I argued that, at least in that circumstance, that stable was done in probably the best way you could have literally wrote it. Because it shows that people are at fault when things go wrong, not some evil, malicious plan that was hundreds of years in the past coming to fruition. I know it's a fetish, but literally speaking, it makes more sense than, ooh, this company be bad.
I'm trying to remember, because it did come up, I think, even when I was still reading the story, that wasn't originally how that vault was supposed to be, a stable was supposed to be, and then it was because reasons. I didn't really understand how it became that way. Like, I always thought it was deliberately
I don't understand how it became that way either, but
whatever it did.
At least there is a reason for it, even if the reason is never explicitly stated.
Yeah, it was still going off Stable-Tech isn't deliberately evil, which I think is what you really want to do. Because it doesn't make sense the way a lot of people end up reading it, which is a bit of a shame, because I think it's more interesting.
Every time I've read a fic about any kind of stable program, basically the things that go wrong are either because of incompetence, the dwellers, and it's not because Stable Tech did something malicious in the past that purposely screwed the stable over.
Right. That's really, I guess I'll have to comment on that because I think we're in agreement.
Unless there's any more questions, I believe this is a good place to end it for the night. This has been a somewhat shorter episode than last time.
I can talk more. You want me to talk more?
It's fine. It's fine. So, this has been Apoc Horse Talk with your hosts, Gan Aegis and BG, and our guest tonight has been no one. And until next time, keep your eyes trained and your gun in its holster, because you never know what the wasteland brings. And have a good night.